Wow, it's rich, Jeff. Great work. I can see the pattern. It's extensible. I think it's quite good for a cash application that needs to scale. This looks like it can scale quite nicely. Great work. Really great work. I anticipate we'll be enhancing this quite a bit for our clients.
So the way that we went about solutioning this is that we used a couple of existing libraries that we already have. One of them, which I don't have up on the screen here, is our SFTP solution. And we had the client help us establish an SFTP connection from the bank to NetSuite using our SFTP tool. And then we're able to pull that BAI2 file directly into the NetSuite file cabinet. And then from that point, the file that gets put into the NetSuite file cabinet is automatically picked up by our record import export manager. What it's doing is it's taking this BAI2 file and it's parsing all of that data out into a big JSON object that we're able to then use to process through our cache application and create all of the records downstream inside of NetSuite. Within Ream, there are a few different types of files or types of formats that are supported. We have CSV, tab, pipe, XML, JSON, etc. There's no processor inside of NetSuite, at least natively, to be able to parse this BAI2 data into a digestible format. So just wrote our own flat file text parser, and now Ream natively supports the parsing of BAI2 data.
Okay, so the beauty of it is the idea is you define the data here in terms of like its file pattern, its layout pattern, and so forth. This allows it to ingest a file and know how to parse it, then to present the information in a standardized way, which is a function of JSON and some other data formats that allows you to stay in a particular business logic mind frame for how you're going to actually move that data into the NetSuite database properly, correct?
Correct. This one was a job that has already been parsed from Ream into cache application. So I will show you the visual process of how all of these records get created from this Ream job. So once this file is picked up and processed by Ream, sort of the last step in the Ream process is to feed this JSON data into cache application automatically. We may need to create a single batch of transactional data, or we may need to create multiple batches in some cases. It just depends on the data contained within the file. So this Ream job will yield either one or multiple Cash App batch records. And then each batch will give us some controls that are pulled directly from the BAI2 file, which will give us an indicator of how many payments are contained within that given batch, and then the aggregate payment amount for that given batch. So that information is immediately stored on the Cash App batch record in two fields. And then as Cash App starts to process this data, find open invoices in NetSuite and apply payment to them where it's able to, it will also update these fields on the right, which will give us a total for how many transactions have actually been created inside of NetSuite. And then at the end of the process, how many payment records are created from those transaction records.
Okay, did I hear you correct though, that one BAI2 file may contain one or more of these batch records? There must be some logic in that file that you can see this is going to represent one batch, that may represent another batch, and obviously a batch can contain multiple transactions.
That's correct. And it's all represented in BAI2 formatting by the first two digits of every row. Okay, so yeah, one file could have multiple batches. Within the context of a batch, there is multiple transactions. So nested underneath a Cash App batch record is to create multiple Cash App transactions. And that's what you're seeing here in this transactions tab. So from the 46 transactions that were contained within the BAI2 file, we create 46 different Cash App transaction records. For each PRI Cash App transaction record, that gives us the data to be able to determine which invoice or invoices this particular payment can apply toward. And then we will create one or multiple NetSuite customer payment records and apply those payment records to the open invoices once they're matched. Part of the design of this application is that there is client-specific business logic that we can incorporate on a case-by-case basis, or even on a bank file by bank file basis, to be able to determine how to take the payment that's contained within the file, match it to one or multiple NetSuite invoices, and apply either one or multiple customer payments to those invoices, just depending upon the data within.
I see something here where it says matching status. It says in the rows down below, it says review not matched. Can you talk about that a little bit? And I see something that says dummy payment record. Can you, because there's real payment records, NetSuite ones, can you help explain that a little bit?
With respect to the matching status, what we wanted to do is we wanted to give very clear visual indicator to the client what the application is able to match and apply automatically, and what they're not able to match and apply automatically. So that's why you see these color-coded rows here with different matching statuses. So we have a review status, and what that basically means in our world is that using the information contained within the bank file, we were able to find invoices in NetSuite that are open and need to be paid that could potentially be applied, but because of the uncertainty, there's different use cases, right? One of them is there's not like an exact total match, or maybe there's ambiguity, right? Based on the information that we're able to pull from the BAI2 file, we think we might know which invoice this payment applies to, but we're not 100% sure. So what we'll do is we'll put that in review status. And when we go take a look at this transaction, what we're actually doing, if we're not able to match anything, you'll see this not matched status. And that's kind of our default status. You know, we don't have enough information, is what we're saying, to be able to apply this payment directly to an invoice automatically. Now, if we do have some information and we're just not sure what to do with it, we'll put it in review status. What we're doing is we're having the customer name and the customer ID picked up from the bank file. And there is the notion of what we're calling a Cash App matching rule that exists inside of NetSuite for each client. So what we're doing is, as these bank files are coming into NetSuite, and as the application is applying payment to open invoices, we're attributing these customer IDs and the customer names that are pulled from the bank file to the actual client or customer record that we're matching to.
Is it learning as we go, as we have to do the first time we match it, it would know the subsequent time?
That's exactly right. So the next time that this bank file is pulled up, it's just going to look at this customer ID and say, hey, we know who this is. Now we don't need to look for every open invoice in the system. We just need to look at the invoices that pertain to that particular customer. So the application is learning as we continue to process data through it.
You have some information at the top here trying to describe what to do.
Yes. So this is an example of a transaction that is in review status. We think we might know what to do with the payment, but we're not 100% sure. We will present to the user this banner that will tell them the potential either issues that we ran into, or if there's ambiguity within the payment record and we're not exactly sure who to apply it to. All of those type of alerts will be surfaced to the user as well. And all of these are stored inside of NetSuite so that we can, drive safe searches from them and be able to report off of them. Couple of fields here that are important, and we chose to surface this information and display it here because this is what they had traditionally used with Celigo to be able to identify which invoices this payment could be applied to. So we have this payment remitted by this customer for $13,214. And you can see, if I'm looking at the addenda information, we have these patterns here, right? RMR, IV, these are coming from that EDI 823 specification, but we've got our invoice number right here. And right beside it, we've got how much the payment was for that particular invoice, right? So if you sum all this up, it will add up to 13,214.
Nice, okay.
And what we've done below is we've actually gone in and we've found those invoice numbers by parsing this addenda information. And we've surfaced those invoice transactions right here below. So we have a custom tab called Match Transactions. And really the intention here for a user is, on a daily basis or whenever these files get processed into NetSuite, is to come in, specifically look at the ones that are in a review status or a not matched status and apply them. So you had mentioned earlier dummy payments, right? You see this dummy payment record here when we're looking at the batch. So what we do by default is, if we're not able to fully apply a payment to one or more invoices, we will take the payment and we will create a dummy payment record. The dummy payment record serves as a way for the client to be able to reconcile their bank feeds to the payments that exist inside of NetSuite. If we're not able to find a customer's invoice and apply a payment to that invoice, we will create a dummy payment. That way they're able to reconcile and tie everything to the bank. And then when the team comes back in and actually matches each of these transactions that are in review or a not match status, that dummy payment will be removed. And then the balance of that payment will be transferred over into an actual customer payment, or sometimes multiple customer payments.
Okay, but we're calling it a dummy payment record, but this is actually a real financial transaction inside NetSuite, correct? That allows them to pay out their cash, correct?
That's correct. So we specified a dummy customer, and we are in Sandbox. So we actually just use the dummy customer that was provided previously by Soligo in this case.
I see.
But this kind of serves as an indicator that this particular payment isn't applied to anything, any customer invoice in the system, but we still needed a way to tie it out to cash, right?
So it's floating. Now, of course, what starts to happen though is that we cross time periods. So in other words, we're going to need to close the books. So how do you move from a dummy payment record to a real payment record once you've done your real work of identification? What's that look like?
So what we do is we've got this match transactions tab here below. Because we're able to grab some of this information from the BAI2 addenda information, we're able to pre-populate the invoices that we think that this payment should apply to in the system. And then what the customer can do is they could we've got an auto apply option where they can just check it and it'll apply the payment amount, or they can come in and they can specify the amounts that we want to apply to each one of these invoices. And if the invoice that they want to apply this payment toward is not found, you can either find an invoice number automatically. We've also got another utility that we built for the app for the client where you can specify a range, a min and a max amount, and then NetSuite will go and it'll find any open transactions that match that specific amount.
Oh my God, that's great.
They can automatically apply that here.
So the whole point is we're in now a staging area to do the work on these records. They're not having financial impact. We already did the financial impact. So cash is reconciled at the bank side, but now we're really trying to apply cash and we got to get it all prepped so we can get the storyline right. That's the goal, correct?
Correct. And this Cash App transaction record also serves as the mechanism to do that. So it's actually, take that unapplied cash and apply it to open invoices inside of NetSuite and reconcile all of that. And the way that we do that is just by specifying the amounts here. So all the customer has to do is specify all of those amounts and then save it. And then the application will transfer any funds that is being held in that dummy payment record out of that dummy payment record and then into customer payment records that apply to the invoices that are specified here.
Okay, so in many respects, this follows our pattern of our account clearing model. That dummy payment record goes against that customer against a certain GL account, which is meant to be cleared. And as we apply it, we're eating away at that value.
Correct. You'll notice that I saved this page just now. It took a second to process, but our transaction status changed from review to fully applied. What we did in the background is we were able to take that entire amount, the 13,214, and we were able to tie that amount out to different invoices in the system.
Wow.
And if you remember a second ago, I didn't point this out, but there was a balance sitting here on this column.
Oh.
Right. So each one of these invoices had an open balance. We were able to apply that full amount and net that balance out to zero. Right. So all of these invoices are now fully applied. Yep. And they're all applied to a single payment record. You can see here.
This is awesome.
Now, this match transactions tab is flexible enough to be able to take this payment amount and apply it to an invoice that pertains to a different customer altogether. Now, in this case, everything was related to open invoices for Carson companies, but sometimes this client had clients that were remitting payment on behalf of multiple customers, right? So in those cases, what will happen is we will create a unique payment record for each distinct customer that they decide to apply this cash toward. And then it will, within the context of each one of those payments, it will find all of the invoices for each customer and it will know which amounts to apply. I
can totally see the pattern. It's brilliant. When you now go over to the payment record on the right, does it have a cross-reference back to this record so you can see its origin?
It does. And we also have that information linked through this native transactions tab. So at any point, you'll also be able to see the native payment records that apply toward this particular PRI Cash App transaction record.
Native transactions, if there was two customers there would have been two of these records for this over here. You use it as a grouping logic.
Correct.
Okay. Many times clients have credit memos in their flows. Did credit memos come up as one of the transaction types that they would have to apply to get the monies to tie out?
In this client's specific use case, there were no credit memos that we needed to concern ourselves with. So we have only written this application to be able to apply to invoices, but we already have the structure inside of the application in place to be able to pretty quickly incorporate credit memos if needed.
Okay, I could visualize that. And then, of course, some customers also constitute money coming in as customer deposits. Naturally, we have a whole different way that we're able to have clients represent money coming in for customer deposits as invoices with all the proper accounting to make that all streamlined. But did this customer also have any customer deposit concerns or no?
No customer deposit concerns. So we didn't focus in on that either. It was really just focusing in on open invoices and applying payments to them.
Okay, but it looks to me just like you were saying, the patterns here are good. If we have identifying information to the quality of what they're trying to do, it wouldn't be a problem to get that all there. So
that's correct. Yeah. I think the foundation is very solid in that regard. What we are doing is we're basically taking the addenda information and we're trying our best to find a transaction number. Now, right now, we're only looking at invoice numbers, but we can easily expand that out to look at other types of transactions as well.
Yeah.
And if there's an amount, it's really a question of figuring out what to do downstream once we've found that match.
Wow. It's rich. I also see the architecture can be extended to adapt to various business rules. Quite rich, quite rich.
Yes, quite rich. And when we talk about extensibility, let's take a look at something real quick here. There's a couple of features that we built in the context of what we're calling a Cash App configuration record. So this configuration record tells our application what type of file that we're expecting to be processed. Right now, we're supporting BAI2 and BAI Lockbox. And then each configuration record can come with its own plugin. So if anyone's familiar with the NetSuite platform, there's the notion of a plugin, which we can then leverage on a contextual basis to be able to do different things. So the Cash App will call the plugin script that we have specified here. And then within that plugin script, we have client-specific matching and cash application logic that we've written for this particular bank file to help us either find matching applications a lot quicker and a lot more granular than we would do it just through the native core application, but then also to extend that out a little bit more to be able to automatically apply payments. So when I was saying earlier that we can build this application for a client's use case to be able to take a payment and apply that to multiple invoices, this is the mechanism by which we would do that. We would create a plugin script and we would write our own client-specific business logic in that file to be able to take a payment and apply it to multiple invoices in the system.
I see the power of that. And then looking at some of the other data here, it looks like there's a couple things that you did. You looks like you have an algorithm for determining what you will just write off if it hits a certain threshold, and it looks like you have a target transaction type to write off the amounts to get it to close, the transaction close. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. And I didn't demo that prior, but what we can do is we specify this write-off threshold, and that's completely configurable. But what will happen is when we come in to a Cash App transaction record, let me see if I can force this to actually happen here. And depending upon whether we under apply or over apply cash, as long as it falls within that threshold that we're specifying in configuration.
So now I can see this is the heart of the application. We don't care where the source of the money comes from. Fine, we will do a lockbox, one's ACH, one's the paper checks, and so it doesn't matter. Once we get it into this pattern, much of this is about just going, hey, if we can get good data from the source, it'll just help this along.
Correct. When it comes to our Cash App configuration record, is we've got configurable data that we're passing into the plugin. It's kind of hard to see here. There, it looks like a bunch of just gibberish, but we actually have patterns that we're defining here that are configurable. So these patterns are patterns inside of the data that exist within these addenda strings that allow us to be able to decipher which invoice numbers and potentially which amounts this payment could apply toward.
It looks
So
like regex.
as it is regex, and as we continue to identify more patterns, more distinct patterns from the bank files that we're getting, we're able to extend this application by creating new regex patterns to allow the application to automatically match to invoices. So we're trying to basically fish the invoice numbers out of this data that's could be formatted 1,000 different ways to be able to match that to transactions in the system.
That's exciting because we wouldn't have to actually touch the script. We just touch the definition in here and it should do the work for us, correct?
That's exactly correct. And that's the intention, is to be able to not have to, have a developer necessarily come in and write code, but maybe just somebody who's proficient enough in knowing the regex rules to be able to extend this.
Hey, Jeff, this is awesome. This is really, really great work. I love it.